And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It's my favorite day of the week and should be yours as well, because it is the day that the Heartland Institute live streams the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm the vice president of the Heartland Institute and your host for today. There is nothing else like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere all around the world, actually. We have a lot of international viewers that are in the chat with us on YouTube right now. So I hope all of you will like, share, and subscribe and leave your comments underneath this video. These all convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program and to get this show in front of more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve at all of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this here program, our YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for The Climate Realism Show. And you can help donate a little bit of money to help us make this show every single week. Any support you can give is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank our streaming partners, those being junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, and What's Up With That. So we have a pretty special show to get to today with our friends from the Great White North. But first, let's introduce our usual panel here. And one of the people there is Anthony Watts. He is a senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That. We also have Sterling Burnett. He is the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And also, of course, Linnea Lueken. She's a research fellow for energy and environment policy at Heartland. Welcome to our usual panelists and our two very special guests from up in Canuckistan, also known as Canada, north of the border here in the United States. We have Tom Harris of the International Climate Science Coalition and Ron Davison. He's the president of the Friends of Science Society, both fantastic Canadian organizations that are like us, nonprofits, and could also use your help. Welcome, Ron and Tom, to the program.
Hey, nice to be on.
Nice to meet all of you. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
We're looking forward to having a discussion with you. They're on the program today, folks. The Heartland Institute, actually, I should say two of the co-lead authors of a new book called Energy and Climate at a Glance, Canadian edition. Sterling Burnett and Ron were the two lead authors, and Tom Harris was a contributing author. There's several men involved in that project, and it's a timely book being released just this week to fight back at net zero nonsense up there in Canada. Fellas, I saw a chart, and Linnea was on the In the Tank podcast from the Heartland Institute yesterday at this very time, and I brought up a chart that showed that in every developed country, the ruling class had been voted out over the last year. And it's the first time that's happened. They were tracking elections since 1905. And this is the first time that we get to the end of the year and every single incumbent party and ruling class were voted out. You guys are next.
Except us.
I hope so.
It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming. Great. And this book is going to help make the case for climate realism up in Canada, which is something that you two guys have been fighting for a long time. And now I think the fight is really going to come on. But go ahead.
If I can interject real quickly. So the booklet is published by Canadians for a Sensible Climate Policy, and you can find it at Friends of Science on sale.
Yep, we'll put that up on
I just
screen.
want to point out our administrator is out of town for a couple of days, so it will be a few days before we can get it.
Yeah, and you can order it through
Unfortunately.
ICSC as well at icsc-canada.com, starting in about a day.
Great. Well, we'll have the websites where you can get the book scrolling across the bottom of the screen here as we move along in the program today. And yeah, as I mentioned just before we went on air, I'm wearing a flannel shirt in tribute to our Canadian friends. I feel warm and fuzzy already. All right.
I have a lot of them.
Yes. Yes. This is actually isn't this the formal shirt in a Canadian tuxedo? Isn't this what you have underneath?
Yeah, bring on the global warming.
I thought a Canadian tuxedo was all denim.
Style choice.
That is true. I have a denim jacket. Gosh darn it. Maybe if I'm off camera, I'll go get it. All right. So here we go. So you guys should, Ron and Tom, you should have some fun. We like to start off our show every week with something we call the crazy climate news of the week. And here we go. I made that drop just for Anthony. He never tires of looking at it. Always makes him smile. The good old Bill Nye. All right.
I wonder, you know, with all these celebrities that are leaving the United States now, supposedly because Trump got elected, is Bill Nye going to go to Canada? And if he does, would you accept him?
No. Put a dunce cap on it and make him sit in the
him.
corner.
Yes. All right. Well, let's see here. Let's see if we can get this story up here on the screen. Andy, our producer extraordinaire, is off today, so I'm trying to host and produce at the same time. So if you see a little bit of a hiccup, I hope you won't, but that'll be the cause. All right, here we go. This is a story from the Daily Skeptic, which is spelled with a C, so that must be either in the UK or Canada. You guys misspell things all the time, but that's okay. We have it here. Science shock. UK Met Office is, quote, inventing temperature data from 100 non-existent stations. I think, guys, that we've touched on this in past shows recently, but let's hit on this again because I think it's very important. I'll read a bit from the story. Shocking evidence has emerged that points to the UK Met Office inventing temperature data from over 100 non-existent weather stations. The explosive allegations have been made by citizen journalist Ray Sanders and sent to the new Labour Science Minister, Peter Kyle, MP. Following a number of Freedom of Information requests to the Met Office and diligent fieldwork visiting individual stations, Sanders has discovered that 103 stations out of 302 sites supplying temperature averages do not exist. Quote, how would any reasonable observer know that the data was not real and simply made up by a government agency, asked Sanders. He calls for an open declaration of likely inaccuracy of existing published data, quote, to avoid other institutions and researchers using unreliable data and reaching erroneous conclusions, unquote. Now, Anthony Watts, you might be the best person in the entire world to talk about this issue. You are currently working on a project with Heartland to set up new temperature stations that actually will exist all across America and hopefully internationally. You've written an important report for Heartland on how most of the temperature stations that we do have down here in the lower 48 that do exist are actually pretty much garbage and run too hot. So this story is starting to get a little pickup, and maybe it needs to get more pickup.
Yeah, well, I would say let's use the Dan Rather defense on it. These are fake but accurate. Here's what's going on. This started in the United States. And I will credit Tony Heller for finding a number of these. I also found some myself. But the bottom line is that the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, considers continuity of record to be more important than the accuracy of the record. And so what's been happening is that as stations close due to attrition, people that have been volunteer observers, they get old, they get tired, they don't want to do it anymore, and the station closes, they can't find an alternate. And so what happens is NOAA fills in the data from surrounding stations and creates a continuity of record, which is completely false. It's made up on the spot. So the UK, the Met Office, they played follow the leader. And so they're doing the exact same thing over there. It's one of these stupid artifacts of their homogenization process. And in no branch of science that I can think of would this kind of making up data just to make a continuity of record be tolerated? It should be stopped, and stopped right now.
I used to do that in high school all the time with my physics experiments. Is that not okay?
just fill in whatever it gets you the answer you want.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, what they're doing. The interesting thing about this story, as you know, Jim, I wrote about it in Climate Change Weekly this week. And it's not just that over a third of their stations, we found in the U.S., Epoch Times did an investigative report and found about 30% of the stations in the U.S. didn't exist. But so a third of the stations there didn't exist. But of the ones that are left, they run afoul of what Anthony also detailed in his previous reports, which is most of their stations are garbage. He found that, I forget, some absurdly low number. It was like, I don't know, 18 or 37 of the stations met their top tier 1 and 2 standards. The rest of them, many of them were 4 and 5, which the WMO says, look, could have a range of error of 2 to 5 degrees and are not fit for use. That's crazy.
It is, and yet it's all over. It's everywhere. My study published in 2022 showed that up to 96% of the stations I surveyed all across America, and these were not selected specifically. This was pretty much random. A lot of just random driving went on, and I had volunteers also doing some random driving to places, and it didn't matter where they were, from Florida all the way up to the Northeast, to the West Coast, to the Great Plains. These stations were biased high in temperature because of their placement. And what's happened is that infrastructure has grown up around it. The classic idea behind this, to help you get a thought about it, is Chicago O'Hare Airport. Now, Chicago O'Hare Airport has been measuring temperature since the airport was put together, started way back in the 30s, right? So what was the airport? The identifier that you have for Chicago O'Hare is ORD, and that stands for O'Hare now, but it originally stood for Orchard Field, ORD, Orchard Field. And so that's how it started. It went from this, sort of agricultural paradise up to this big megaplex of concrete and asphalt and terminals and jet exhaust and all this other stuff, yet they still measure the temperature there. It's not suitable for climate. It's not fit for purpose.
Yeah, and yet they're saying that the temperature rate of increase has increased by 1/100th of a degree in global temperature. It's ridiculous.
Oh, it's increased.
Go,
It's increased as they've shut down stations and made up numbers for the non-existing stations.
Yeah, just to put a personal note on it, in Calgary, I looked at the measured and the homogenized temperatures. And since 1973, when they put the newest station in, it goes back to 1884 from another station out at the airport. But the measured temperatures have dropped 1.7 degrees. Our homogenized temperatures have gone up 1.35 degrees, which I find ridiculous.
That's like 2.5 degrees gap.
It's between, 3. It's over 3 degrees change. Yeah. And my experience is I feel measured temperatures, not homogenized temperatures.
Yeah. And I guess, Anthony, you noticed they said that the global average temperature increase rate has increased by 1/100th of a degree from 0.25 per decade to 0.26. And they say it's the fastest in history. So you go back to 1200 AD or something. I mean, what's your accuracy, about plus or minus 2? So you really, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yep. All right, we'll move on to our second crazy climate news of the week. Although, speaking of crazy, I was not kidding. I told you guys I had a denim jacket in the closet over there. Anthony Watts spoke just long enough for me to grab it and put it on. And I actually am wearing jeans, so this is officially a Canadian tuxedo. So that's
good.
We're one with you.
I may have a corduroy jacket that I think Canadians also like corduroy.
No, I think I got a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey somewhere.
There you go.
Oh, careful now.
Oh, well, yeah.
Okay, we're going to start an actual war if we continue down this line of conversation. So let's go.
Going hockey.
That is true. All right, I'm going to try to get the next thing up here. Let's see. Oh my gosh, I hit the wrong button.
The next craziness coming up now.
Yes, our next crazy thing here. I hit the wrong darn button. There we go. All right. So this is from 1 second. This is from Yale Climate Connections. I guess this is still a growth industry in academia. We'll see how long that lasts. This says the planet is on the brink of an irreversible climate disaster, scientists warn. Oh my gosh. That's the first time I've ever seen a headline like that. The 2004 State of the Climate Report says climate scientists are more worried than ever and calls for, quote, transformative science-based solutions across all aspects of society. Considering we just saw that one third of all temperature stations in the UK don't exist, maybe science-based actually would be good. Real science, not fake science. Anyway, story says that Earth's climate in 2024 is, quote, in a major crisis with worse to come if we continue with business as usual. A team of 14 climate scientists warned in the 2024 State of the Climate Report. Perilous times on planet Earth. Ooh, goodness. The report did not sugarcoat their view of the dangers humanity is facing. Quote, we are on the brink of an irreversible climate disaster, the report begins. This is a global emergency beyond any doubt. Much of the very fabric of life on Earth is imperiled. We are stepping into a critical and unpredictable new phase of the climate crisis. The report is the latest such annual peer-reviewed paper published by the journal Bioscience by an international team of scientists led by Oregon State ecologist William Ripple.
We all know that biologists are great climatologists, right?
They are.
Ecologists are even better. Yeah.
Right. So just real quick here, we'll continue on. The authors found that 25 of 35, quote, planetary vital signs, unquote, reached record levels last year, including global temperatures, human climate pollution, fossil fuel subsidies, heat-related mortality rates, meat production, and loss of forest cover. Then it goes blah, blah, blah. We fear the danger of a climate breakdown. Now, Sterling, let's start with you here. I mean, these reports never stop. It's just one after another one, claiming to be peer-reviewed. Is this still going to be a growth industry, or maybe the funding is going to start to dry up for this nonsense?
Well, I don't know. As long as the World Bank and them are still funding this crap, it could go on forever. I was led to wonder just how many times has the end been predicted since the 70s? None of the predictions having come true. They always give you some date in the relatively near future, which then gets surpassed. And they say, like a death cult, they say, "Oh well, we did the math wrong. We got to make another prediction." And in a few more years, and it passes. But how you know this isn't science is look at what they take as the metrics. The Earth doesn't care whether you're using fossil fuels. How is that a tipping point for the Earth? Now, if you believe emissions are a problem, but that has not, you can, theoretically, you could remove all the emissions and still use the fossil fuels. So the Earth doesn't care about fossil fuels. The Earth doesn't care about most of these things. In fact, the Earth will abide, and so will human society, so long as politicians don't go mucking about and take away our fossil fuels prematurely before we have better alternatives. Better, cheaper, as reliable alternatives. I'm not saying we won't have them someday. There may be a day when we have fusion energy, right? Nuclear fusion. And that could replace a lot of electricity. We don't have it now. I don't suspect we'll have it for the remainder of my life. But the point is, when we have alternative sources that are reliable, as inexpensive, that won't keep present generations of poor people impoverished. That is the threat, that a billion people don't have access to reliable electricity. Several hundred million still have malnutrition and starvation each year. And that's not due to climate change. That's due to lack of access to the things that have helped Western societies avoid having to pray to the gods and sacrifice virgins to the climate, which was fossil fuels. It's offensive for these guys to claim to be scientists and to claim that you can't peer review something scientifically that's not science, and this isn't science.
Yeah, and you notice how we're always on the brink. I'd say we're on the brink of being on the brink.
Well, it's nice to see that they're toning down.
You're engaging in brinkmanship. Stop it.
They're toning down the narrative and the rhetoric here for sure. With we were boiling the earth a couple of months ago, and now we're just at the brink of an irreversible climate disaster. So to me, that's progress. I don't know.
We're backing off.
Yeah.
Anthony, did you have something you wanted to weigh in on?
Yeah, this headline is so predictable. Charles Rotter, my right-hand man over at What's Up With That, put together with ChatGPT a climate disaster article writer. And basically what's happened here is that climate disaster stories have become so commonplace that now even a robot can write them. And so he's got this template here that we published. It shows exactly, how you can put all these different pieces and phrases together and come up with a media credible story that talked about, this craziness. Hold on.
Yeah.
Craziness.
One went berserk.
Craziness
like
that will
Mad Lib.
pass peer. Craziness that will pass peer review, because peer review is nothing more than, oh, does this agree with what I say? Oh yeah, it does. Okay, well then it's passed the muster. Done.
Yeah, it's PAL review. It's not peer review. It's PAL.
PAL review, exactly.
Always has been. All right. So go to whatsupwiththat.com. You can check that out yourself. And the idea that ChatGPT can crank out a climate alarmist story, probably even better than the New York Times. I guess that's going to be more journalists out of work. Oh, well.
I'm convinced they already do use ChatGPT to write their articles, because I've read some that made no sense once you got further into it, or it like outright contradicted itself. So I'm pretty sure that they've already been using computers to write these things for a while, at least for like the smaller outlets.
Yeah, and I learned something the other day about Copilot, which is Microsoft's Bing AI. And that is, if you get in and you show where it's making mistakes, it'll make corrections, but only in your immediate discussion. When you get back in tomorrow, it'll make the same mistake. So I asked it, I said, how do you learn? How do you learn that some of the things you're saying are wrong? And the machine said, well, it's only if my programmer changes my program. So it was saying that we have the fastest rate of warming in history. So I went back, okay, let's take 1,000 years. What was the accuracy in 1200 AD, et cetera? So finally it admitted, oh, well, I guess the accuracy isn't sufficient in the last millennia to compare with today's more accurate measurements. So we really don't know. If you get in tomorrow and ask the same question, it'll give you, oh, yes, it's the fastest in history. So it forgets. As soon as you get out of your session, it doesn't remember the correction.
If artificial intelligence actually starts telling the truth about what's happening in the climate by actually scraping the real data and spitting it out and letting people know, it will be at that point that I'm worried about Skynet. But until then, we're safe.
Yeah, it's just reading news articles in Wikipedia. It's not
intelligence.
Right. All right. Let's get down to our last one, and this should be a lot of fun. So I came across this on X the other day, and this is a media interview down in New Zealand. And so the Kiwis apparently are working on how to save the planet from methane, as they like to say down there. Very, very charming. So I want to play this about a minute and a half clip from a news article, or I'm sorry, from a news interview that even the presenter down there in New Zealand almost can't believe her ears. Here we go.
Okay, so how we can reduce methane is where your research comes in, right? So you're developing a vaccine. What is it and how does it work?
Yeah, look, what happens is we don't want those bacteria that make the methane to be in the stomach. So what we do is we are adding a vaccine to the cow. The cow will generate antibodies in its saliva. So like we do when we get vaccinated, it makes antibodies, and then the saliva is full of antibodies. They go with the saliva into the stomach, where they attach to the bacteria and stop them from growing, and therefore stop the methane production. So very similar to what we do with vaccination, except in this case it's targeting the bacteria inside the cow's stomach.
Wow. So when is this technology available?
We're working currently, we're being funded by the government and by industry through the Pastoral Greenhouse Gas Research Consortium and New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre. We are targeting currently 5 to 7 years for the technology. This is a very, very leading edge, globally challenging science that we're doing here in New Zealand. So there are technical challenges to making it work. We've shown so far that we can make the antibodies, we can show so far we can get it into the saliva of the animals, and now we're trying to make sure it survives in the stomach to attack those bacteria and stop the methane. So 5 to 7 years.
So in terms of...
So there you have it, guys. This is fantastic news, not just for the planet, but for anybody who travels frequently in airplanes. Eventually.
This is such a terrible idea. I can't.
I think they already have something for this. It's called Beano. You can buy this in the drugstore.
I wonder if it, the methane's produced through the digestion process, and it may be with these bacteria, but I'm wondering if they aid in the digestion process. And
they do. They absolutely do.
I would be concerned that your cows would bloat up and finally explode because their food is no longer digested.
You're destroying beneficial stomach flora. You're probably basically going to give all of these cows like Crohn's disease is what you're going to do with this. This is an awful idea.
Well, maybe we can use this as, it is a very awful idea. And it's I'm a big believer in advancing scientific knowledge and, for useful things. But there is the idea that methane, as they say in the Southern Hemisphere, is is uniquely bad for the environment, even more so, many say, than carbon dioxide. Maybe you guys can discuss that myth or fact for a bit.
Well, when I'm in an enclosed place like the jets or other small spaces, methane can be bad for the environment. I guarantee at the local level. I was hearing this about the vaccines, and I think I know people that I'd like to be test cases for this dead-gum vaccine. When it comes to human trials, I've got the folks to test it on.
Yeah, and of course, William Happer.
Not myself, of course.
I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see what the meat from these cows is going to be labeled at in the supermarket. What is it going to be? Fart-free beef? There's what?
Well, this may just be the part of the plot to get rid of meat eating, right? If the cows end up dying, that helps you reduce your meat consumption. No more meat consumption.
And remember, William Happer at Princeton University has shown that you can double methane, and it doesn't really matter very much because all of main 3 greenhouse gases, methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide, they're essentially close to saturation. We're just not going to see much warming, even if we double. So if the science doesn't back it up anyway.
But on the bright side, he gets a lot of research funding from the government for it.
Yep. Right. Well, they're only they're 5 to 7 years away. How exciting is that?
Yeah, we're on the brink of the brink.
It'll be just a few years after disasters occurred.
Yeah, it's a little too late.
Right.
Apparently we're way too late. We've breached that 1.5 for the second year in a row, I think. So.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get into a couple things. There's one, we usually do something we call the memes of the week or the cartoon of the week, but actually I want to use this tiny segment to kind of update us on something that was pretty serious and now appears to have come to an end, and that is this story. This is the editor-in-chief of Scientific American has resigned after expletive-filled rant against Trump voters. Now, this is a woman. We covered this on the show last week. This is Laura Helmuth, who had a series of 3 expletive-filled rants against Trump voters. And so now she has said, I've decided to leave Scientific American after an exciting 4.5 years as editor-in-chief. I'm going to take some time to think about what comes next and go bird watching. But for now, I'd like to share a very small sample of the work I've been so proud to support. And then she has a thread, which we are not going to read. But the point here being that, as we mentioned last week, the fact that the editor-in-chief of really a popular science magazine of Scientific American that pretends to, that I shouldn't say pretends, but purports to present to lay people the scientific world and consensus in the sense that makes sense, not like in climate, but to inform people about what is happening out there in the world of science. It is an example of how all science, it seems, also from scientific journals, as Tom Harris said, are interested in PAL review, not peer review. And then here is even a popular scientific magazine that is dedicated to advancing political agendas and not informing people on science. So I guess this is a small victory, depends on who she's replaced with. But in this case, after 4.5 years, a radical leftist is no longer at the helm of, I guess, a once prestigious magazine, journal.
You know, it's interesting. Scientific American went 126 years without ever endorsing a presidential candidate. They said, we're not into politics. We do science. 4.5 years ago, she becomes the editor-in-chief just before the 2020 election. And for the first time ever, they endorsed the candidate, Biden. And then they endorsed Harris. I'm hoping that they get back to science and get away from politics and no longer, I don't care what the editor-in-chief of Scientific American or their editors have to say about politics. I want them to inform me about science. And I think it's no coincidence that the first time ever that happened came about 6 months after she took the helm. Hopefully they will, the publishers who are going to lose the money when people stop subscribing to this journal, hopefully they'll say, you know what? We need to get away from this. We need to go back to doing the science.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. They've had a long history over the past 20 or so years of getting worse and worse and worse. And I used to subscribe to Scientific American. It was one of my favorite monthly reads. Now I can't even stand to look at it.
That was my approach too. I got it regularly, and it was one of the first ones I had to give up. I just couldn't stomach it anymore.
Do you think they're going to follow the approach of the Los Angeles Times and say, hey, we're fair and balanced, so fire all of their editors?
Yeah, well, you know,
that's what it'll take.
I actually suggested to a few of my friends and colleagues that now that they've cleared out their editorial staff at the LA Times, maybe we can start submitting op-eds and things again, because they're the ones that came to the decision. They were the first. The Los Angeles Times, the first that came to the decision. They would no longer publish any climate realist or skeptics. You couldn't get a letter to the editor published. You couldn't get an op-ed published. The debate was over. Hopefully that will change.
Yeah. Look, the market is there. It exists. The market for what Scientific American used to be is still there. It still exists. People are finding it in different places. They're finding it at places, frankly, like climateataglance.com. They're finding it at Tom, your website, Ron, your website. We have so many friends and allies in the climate realist movement so there is a market for it, and Scientific American has abandoned that market. And so they can choose in the next iteration of itself to actually seek out that market or continue down its ideological, blind alley, but we'll see.
Yeah. All the way to bankruptcy.
Yep. That's the way it's working. But yeah, so and then one more thing here, an image that Anthony shared just before we went on the air, which I think is a pretty good thing to mention. This is the number of named storms. Well, you can take us through it, Anthony.
Yeah, well, Michael Mann went on record, in a big way, saying that there was going to be 33 named storms in the Atlantic for 2024. And everyone who had half a brain and any kind of an understanding of climate science or hurricanes or anything said, you've got to be kidding me. Not going to happen. Well, so far it hasn't. In 2024, only 18 so far, and the clock is ticking.
Yep.
Hurricane season ends December 1st, so we've got 15 days for an additional 12 storms, or no, 15 storms to be named, and I don't think it's going to happen. Will man eat crow? No, he's leaving Twitter because people are mean, and Trump got elected, so he's going to go over on Blue Sky with Laura Helmuth, and they'll have their rant fest over there.
Right. Not that Michael Mann leaving Twitter had anything to do with us, because he's blocked everybody on this call, and probably most people in the audience if they've ever engaged with him. So that's just the way he rolls. And all of these threats. I mean, Stephen King said he's leaving on January 20th, I think, and other people are leaving, and they're not leaving. They're coming back. They're all coming back. They can't stay away. They can't quit Twitter. They just can't. So it's going to be fun when they come crawling back.
There's no other comparable. Blue Sky, how many subscribers does Blue Sky have? 2,000? I don't think man wants to lose that many people following him.
No, for sure. All right.
Yeah, he'll come up with some excuse somewhere around January 20th to stay on. I can't wait to read it.
His ego will not suffer losing that many followers.
For sure. For sure. Okay. All right. Well, let's. So that was a very fun segment. I'm hope Ron and Tom, you guys had a good time, and I know our audience really enjoyed it. But let's get into our main topic today, and that is this new book, Energy and Climate at a Glance, a Canadian edition. Sterling, maybe you can kind of lead. You are a co-author on this, but maybe we can. Maybe I'll start it off by just asking Ron and Tom, why is this book necessary, and why is the timing for it really good right now in Canada?
Yeah, as lead author, I'll let you go first, Ron.
All right, thank you. Well, it's we set it up obviously as in the format that you guys used with Climate at a Glance, and we just wanted to move it into something that had a little more Canadian perspective. And it as I said, it's set up like your format. It's there's just a few statements and some comments, key takeaways, and we've got the reports highlighted where you can go find all the detailed work that people like Ross McKittrick and Vaclav Smil and many others have done already. And it's just it's been a long time, and we're getting to the point now where people are actually starting to figure out that there is a real need for energy security. And while climate change might be a problem, it's not the biggest problems we face.
Yeah, for sure. And it's going to be very useful for the activists that I help organize. Here in Ottawa, for example, I've been working with various people who go to what are called delegations, where they actually speak to committees in the city, and they go to public meetings and debates and things like that. And they use the tools of Saul Alinsky, rules for radicals. We actually get to the microphone right away, and we make sure that the people asking questions actually know more about the topic they're asking about than anybody else in the room. And they specifically ask politicians who they know don't know it. So we're using a lot of the rules. We also tend to personalize it. In other words, we say, why did you vote for this particular program? We don't just say, oh, why did the city do it? And it's very interesting. A lot of people don't realize, but the left took over our institutions largely by using the rules of Saul Alinsky from Rules for Radicals. So this book is going to be what we then leave with the politicians. We leave with the leading opinion makers and reporters and others. We'll be leaving this with leading experts and others across our society. So this will be a great tool for our activists.
Yeah. So, and where can one get a copy of this book? I know it's the Heartland Institute put out a blasted a press release on this. I know that I forwarded at least one contact to one of you guys earlier this week to talk about it. But where can one start to purchase this? And are they affordable so you can buy multiple copies and get them into other people's hands?
Yeah, they're just $14 Canadian each, plus shipping and handling. And within the next couple of days, they'll be able to go to icsc-canada.com and actually order a book. And we got a donate page. Click on the donate page, but put in the comment when you're doing the donation, this is for the Climate Green book, as we call it. And $14 Canadian, you can't lose. It's a pretty substantial book, too. We'll mail it to you.
$14
And it will
Canadian. Is that
also
about?
be-
That's about $3.50 American, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, we should sell it in gold instead of dollars
There
Canadian
you
because they go down so fast. But yeah, 14 Canadian, it's about $10 American.
Yeah, it will also be available at Friends of Science the middle of next week. friendsofscience.org.
Okay. Is that
and
website
hopefully,
good?
hopefully one,
Yeah, that's great. My website.
ICSC-canada.com. Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Not immediately, but within a couple of days.
Okay.
and hopefully after they've had some success selling it, they'll put either chapters or it online for people to download themselves, like we've done with our book, to spread it far and wide. But I know this is an outlay, and they want to spread the word, but they also want to make some money back on it.
Yeah, and
This started for me and Ron. Tom wasn't a part of the meeting, but this started for Ron and I back in October of 2023 with a meeting that John Zacharias, the president of Canadians for a Sensible Climate Policy, held in Canada. And he wanted a book that, as you know, Tom said, you could leave behind, that's easily digestible for the general public and for legislators and for business interests who are pushing the green agenda. And he wanted to cover a little bit more ground than we covered in our Climate at a Glance, because he wanted to hammer on the economics. What's hurting? What are these policies doing to Canada? What are they? What are the economic impacts? What are the benefits? I mean, if Canada follows Trudeau's plans to the T, does everything Trudeau wants to do, get to net zero, how much impact will it have on warming? How much sea level rise will it prevent? How many people's lives will it save? And it turns out it can't be measured. And I don't mean it can't be measured because it's so great. It can't be measured because it doesn't exist. There's no sea level rise prevention. There's no temperature rise prevention. It won't save any lives, though it could cost lives, both in Canada and especially in developing countries. And so their book, I'm going to go through it. It's got 4 sections. They are Canadian climate commitments to net zero at 2050. Section 2, domestic CO2 restrictions are futile and harmful. Section 3, there is no climate crisis. Section 4, the benefits of fossil fuels and CO2. And Section 5, what are our best options? Some of those are very particular to Canada and Canadian issues. Some of them are more general because it's science questions, and the science doesn't discriminate between countries. So if you are Canadian, or if you're outside of Canada, but you really care what goes on in Canada, this book can arm you with the facts about the truth about the science of climate change, the truth about the economics of fighting climate change on Canadians, and is there a better path? Yes, it suggests a better path.
Yeah,
that's how I'd summarize it.
A good half of the book is applicable anywhere, quite frankly. And I'll just point out that people can get this book for free if they commit to us to give it to one of these leading opinion makers and tell us who they give it to. So yeah, if you just want to buy the book, that's great. We'll send it to you. But also, if you want to commit to giving it to a leading politician or a decision maker, we'll give it to you for free.
All right. Well, let me ask you guys, because the first part of that book is, or the first section of the book, relates to Canada and net zero by 2050. Now, the United States has not made any official commitments about net zero. It is now never going to happen that the United States, at least not in the next 4 years, is going to commit itself to net zero. I actually am of the personal opinion that in the next 4 years, everybody will have been abandoning their net zero by 2050 commitments, but especially because the United States is never going to do it. So I want you guys to talk a little bit about how and why Canada dedicated itself. I know you have a socialist nut job as your prime minister, and that explains a lot. He's not real bright, but
Got nice socks. He wears nice socks though.
he does wear nice socks and wears good blackface too as a kid. So,
Yeah.
but so what is the status of net zero 2050 for Canada right now, and how do you even get there?
Yeah, you go ahead, Rob.
Well, we can't get there. It's Ross McKittrick put together a really good report on our status. He looked at emissions reduction plan that Canada has in place, and then went through the information as to where we are. Our goal is 40 to 45% below 2005 emissions levels, and we've only progressed a small part of the way there. It's just not going to happen. Anyways, that's, you get something to add, Tom?
Yeah, well, also it would have no effect anyway. It's interesting, when Pat Michaels was still alive, a wonderful man, Dr. Michaels actually offered to tell us how much our Ottawa climate plan would change world temperature. Because in Ottawa, a city of 1 million people, we have a plan which is $57.4 billion. Okay, that's like about 40 billion American dollars. And we sent him, how much Ottawa was putting out, and we asked how much would it change world temperature if Ottawa met this target of net zero and kept it that way all the way to the end of the 21st century. And he came back with a number. You ready for it? It would affect global temperatures, if you believe the models, by 1/10,000th of 1 degree for $57.4 billion.
Yeah.
Now, Canada is about 1.5% of world emissions. So, yeah, obviously it would be more. Ottawa is a little less than 1% of Canada, but the amounts are just trivial and you can't measure.
No.
Yeah. Well, here I have up on the screen. This is Canadians for Sensible Climate Policy, which you can get to. That URL is sensiblechange.ca. And yeah, our friends there are focused, and Ron and others are focused on, telling the truth. Implementing a net zero by 2050 plan entails significant transition. And as Ron said, it's a transition that is not going to take place. It's not feasible.
Right. And we want to invite people. See the upper right-hand corner of the screen there, it says become a Pathfinder. If you click on that button, you can join our team, actually, because I'm working on contract with them. And Canadians for Sensible Climate Policy have a very nice strategy where people become Pathfinders. They start to have access then to internal information in the website to help them speak out. And I'll be training more and more people across Canada, especially Ontario, to actually speak out at public events and how they can have significant impact and basically replicate what we did in Ottawa. Because in Ottawa, in the last election in 2022, the leading candidate was a climate alarmist, and everybody assumed that she was going to win, although she didn't want to be called she wanted to be called they. But regardless, it looked like she was going to just definitely win. Well, we were able to organize activists who, especially from Action for Canada, they were actually a very prominent supporter of this. And what happened is meeting after meeting after meeting during the election, we swarmed the mic. In other words, we did what Saul Alinsky taught the left to do. And if you become a Pathfinder, we'll work with you to help increase the effectiveness of your presentations to delegations or to public events. So I really do encourage people, click on in Canada, become a Pathfinder. Yeah, that's important because we'll help you speak out and help change. And by the way, the outcome of our activism was that just literally the week before the election, other people who were voting for third and fourth candidates realized the only way we could defeat McKenney was if we voted for the person who was second. And so his support went through the roof. And in a field of about a dozen candidates, he ended up with more than 50% of the vote because people were scared silly that we would end up with a climate activist as our mayor. She wanted to spend $500 million improving our bicycle paths while we were turning away drug addicts from rehab centers because we didn't have enough money. So what happened is, to her great shock, she lost.
All right. We can, anything. Go ahead, Sterling.
She's not the only one who lost recently, right? I mean, I believe in Alberta, there was a bit of a sea change in party control there. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Danielle Smith has taken over as the UCP leader, Conservative Party. And they just recently came out with, they had their annual meeting a few weeks ago, and you guys actually made some notes on that. But they basically come back and said that CO2 is not a pollutant, and they're looking at ways to deal with the net zero issue at our provincial level, at least. So
yeah, we have to push our federal conservative government to start doing that, because unfortunately, while they're against the carbon tax, Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of the official opposition and most likely to become the next Prime Minister of Canada, he's what you in the US would call a rhino, Republican in name only. Well, we call him a sino, conservative in name only when it comes to the climate issue, because what he's saying is that we have to stop climate change, not with tax, but with technology. Okay, with carbon dioxide sequestration underground and electric vehicles, and getting developing countries to not use their coal, instead go on to natural gas. So sadly, he is promoting the climate scare. And I think Trump's election showed very clearly that that's not necessary. You can win even when you're a climate realist. So Pierre Poilievre, wake up. You don't have to support this.
And we had a very prominent politician out in BC just in the last election here that ran on CO2 is not the control knob for climate. And BC is like your California, where they take the left view quite seriously.
Yeah, and
they went from 1.9% approval rating 2 years ago to getting over about 44% of the approval in the actual election, and they were just short a few seats to get a majority.
Yeah, and they got just 1% less, I guess, than the other candidate. Yep. And he was a climate realist. More and more, you look back to Stephen Harper, who was our conservative prime minister, before he got in as prime minister, and of course he won the election. He said the Kyoto Protocol was a money-sucking socialist scheme. And he won. So the whole idea that you have to support the climate scare, Trump is proving you don't have to, and you can still win. So, stop it.
All right. Yep. Stop it indeed. Well, oops, I gotta fix this right. Here we go. So now it is one of our favorite times of certainly for our audience, for our program today on the Climate Realism Show, and that is Q&A time. Now, I know that there are a ton of questions in here, and I know some of them are for Ron and Tom. So, Linnea, take it away. Let's roll.
Sure. Let's start with this question from Chris Nisbet, who asks, which country will officially cancel net zero first? What do you guys think?
It won't be Canada.
Maybe it'd be Azerbaijan.
It might be. Yeah, Azerbaijan. It could be the U.S. It could be. Of course, we don't have it as an official policy.
I think Trump will make it a point to cancel it.
It could be Argentina.
Yeah, they walked out. Good for them.
Yeah,
they walked out. Papua New Guinea didn't show up. Walked out before. They never showed up. They said that it's a waste of our time. Leaders of all the G7 countries except for the UK, as far as I can tell, didn't go to Baku. It's fallen apart. It's fallen apart.
The Taliban went. I mean, it's got to be a good conference if they went.
Well, to be fair, it's being held in Baku, and no one's ever accused Baku. They may be sensible on energy, but no one's ever accused them of being a bastion of human rights.
Yeah.
You also have countries like China and India that are just paying lip service to it. Russia.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think China's ever said, well, they've said we expect to peak our emissions sometime in the future and then eventually reach net zero. Well, eventually the sun will burn out and the earth will die and we'll all reach net zero.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's going to end up being the Russian version before it's all over with. Net zero.
Yeah.
Here's a quick one from It Is I Too, who says, when will Canada vote?
We have
Well,
to
the
do
official
a year. Yeah.
is October next year, but they have a minority government, so it could come at any time.
Yeah, there are a couple of parties that are climate realists. The People's Party of Canada and the Christian Heritage Party. Sadly, they don't have any MPs at all. And so the likelihood that they will, they may get a couple, the PPC, People's Party. But they actually have very sensible climate plans, the two parties. In the last election, PPC had a mistake on their website, so I contacted them and they corrected it. So it's great. So, we do have some smaller parties who are saying the right thing. We've got to push the conservatives, though. Pay attention to what happened in the U.S. Trump won, and he was a climate realist. You don't have to support this. So we're hoping that conservatives will come around.
Awesome. Okay. Here's a question from Slaughter Bartfest, which I guess can go to any of us on the panel, which is, will the EPA get its wings clipped by DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency?
Well, I think more than that, they're going to get their wings clipped by this recent ruling that a lot of these EPA decisions were made without authority. There was an article the other day about CEQ being struck down by the Supreme Court. And basically, a lot of these bureaucratic decisions that have been implemented as law without a vote are basically going to go south. And we're several thousand of them involved in that. So it looks like they may beat Doug to the punch.
Well, I hope that happens, but I'm not so sure that CEQ. The ruling was big because there was a particular regulation that CEQ wrote, but CEQ doesn't write a lot of rules. They do advisories. In fact, that's what the Supreme Court found is you have no regulatory authority. You aren't an agency established to do regulations on energy or the environment. And so you can't pass rules. I don't know how many rules actually came from CEQ. Those are certainly going to be gone or have to be revised and have to be done from a different, a true regulatory agency. But the CEQ is an advisory body to the president. Well, so I maybe it'll impact thousands of rules, but I'm not sure of that.
Vivek Ramaswamy had a long Twitter post yesterday or the day before yesterday, noting that EPA versus West Virginia was decided against EPA, and that he plans to adhere to that decision, unlike the way the Biden administration has done it. He said the decision that basically neutered, if not completely, slayed the Chevron doctrine, that also actually happened, and he's going to apply that to all federal agencies, including the Environmental Protection Agency and NOAA and all these other things. So, we'll see. I think it's pretty exciting, but at least we have Vivek, who is the co-chair of the of DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is recognizing the fact that the Biden administration has been ignoring these important court rulings, and that he intends to apply them. And then if you apply them, an entire set of rules and regulations and justification for existence comes into being. So we'll see.
Yep. All right. Here's a related question from our friend Bob, who says, will Trump have a climate czar, preferably one reporting facts? I don't
think so.
One.
I don't think so either. I think that Trump will say climate's not an issue we need to be addressing at all. So we certainly don't need a czar for it.
As long as that czar is Vlad the Impaler, I'm for it.
Here's one from Energy Colonizer, who asks, on the UK Met Office inventing temperature data, does the UK have FOIA laws like we do in the United States? Laundering and confirming false information reminds me of Five Eyes and Spygate.
Yes, they do. And in fact, ClimateGate was brought about by FOIA laws. The fact that they didn't want to release the emails that Steve McIntyre and other people had requested ended up basically being the impetus for the whole ClimateGate thing, where someone who was privy to all those emails they'd gathered up in anticipation that they might release them, they left them on a server somewhere, they got found, and they got released anyway. And I remember Phil Jones saying something to the effect of, if they ever find out we have an FOIA law here, we're in trouble.
Well, in fact, the story that we led with on the 30%, that was discovered through their FOIA law. A citizen journalist sent a FOIA request to the Met Office and finally got a reply. And then he went out and checked the stations. And then he sent a letter to their new labor minister, but I'm not sure if it's the labor minister or which minister, saying they need to answer these questions. And so, he used their FOIA law to discover the false readings from non-existent stations.
I'm going to do a couple of kind of rapid fire science related questions. We have a few in here and I want to get back to more of the policy stuff, but I do want to address some of these because they're important to talk about. Matt G asks, they can measure the temperature of Earth with satellites apparently, but what degree of accuracy? Anthony?
Well, UAH has been doing this for a while. Dr. Roy Spencer and John Christie. They've been doing this for a while, and I really don't know what the accuracy number is because they don't put error bars on those graphs. But I would think that it's got to be probably within 1/10 of a degree to be useful at all based on the magnitude of the graphs they're plotting. I don't think we can actually measure to the Earth's temperature the accuracy of 100th of a degree, no matter what method you're using.
Well, I think the satellites also don't measure surface temperatures. They measure mid-troposphere.
No, lower troposphere.
Lower troposphere.
At about 11 to 14,000 feet. They can't do the surface because the surface is so noisy because there's all these heat sources and wind and everything else,
And clouds.
Yeah. But they have been calibrated with the radiosonde weather balloon data.
You got weather balloon data and that measures more than one.
Yeah. And last year, NOAA's STAR satellite, they've adjusted theirs back to the UAH type numbers. They just about lay over one another now.
Yeah, Anthony, the GISS record says that they're accurate to 0.05 degrees. Do you think it really is?
All right, this is a question from Kite Man Music who asks, has the extraction of energy by wind turbines had effect on the weather? And I think the answer to that is actually yes. Very locally downstream from wind turbines, you do have a reduction in wind, which changes the average temperature.
Yeah, it would rise it. It would rise it because you would have less convective cooling because you're slowing the wind down. So in the vicinity,
it dries it out.
Yeah, it dries out the soil.
Yeah, so you're actually causing global warming with your wind turbines.
All right. I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce this username, but I'm going to call it Samat. I'm not sure. To help prove UHI, has the data been sorted in low population versus high population areas?
Yes, Dr. Roy Spencer has been publishing this on his blog. He's come up with a data set exactly putting this together, and it shows very clearly that UHI and population coincide strongly. And so that data exists, and he's working on a peer review paper that should be published any day now. Probably faster now that we've got the Trump administration involved.
Yeah, UHI urban heat island, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And what he found was the more dense the population, it's not just population numbers, that they're spread out over, Dallas is a pretty spread out city, but Phoenix is pretty compact. And the more dense the population, the greater the UHI.
Yeah, and people can check it out, drroyspencer.com.
Okay, this is from Nathan. He says, can you clarify? They say methane is a 280 times more powerful greenhouse gas, but that is on a per molecule basis, correct?
It is, but I'm not even sure it's 280 because I've seen a lot of different claims about how much more powerful it is.
Yeah. But I will point out that methane has a very short residence time in the atmosphere. So, we can have a burst of methane come out, and then it'll be gone in, a few months. It just doesn't have a long residence time. And there's lots of things out there that like to eat methane, little bacteriums and things.
I'm not even sure we have a really good measure of the residence time of a molecule of CO2. I've seen debates over that.
Yeah.
It's longer than methane, but it's, How long?
We've had estimates anywhere from, a couple of years up to 1,000+ years.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, this is from our friend Alan, who says, let's spare a thought for Mark Stein. Does anyone know how he's doing?
Well,
Anybody up to date?
Yeah, he's restricted to a wheelchair. He's had very serious health troubles. The stress of all these court cases is incredible. I mean, Tim Ball, for example, he had these court cases and he won, yet it ruined his health. So the key seems to be to avoid actual ad hominem attacks and to not try to attribute motive to people. That seems to be the key to keeping you out of court. If you say somebody's not telling the truth or they're lying, then you're putting yourself up for, they have huge funding. In fact, well, I won't say anything about Michael Mann because I don't want to be sued. But the bottom line is that, yeah, you got to be careful. You can say they're wrong. You can say you disagree with them. But if you start attributing motive, you're potentially in court.
You can be sued in Canadian courts. Remember, he lost there.
Yep.
It was only in the U.S. courts that people were stupid enough not to understand free speech.
Yeah.
In the Canadian courts, they said, no, you're not, you win. You got to pay. And that's why he's not going to Canada, because he's subject to payment if he shows up in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Because he did lose to Tim Ball.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just looked on Mark Stein on steinonline.com. You can check him out there. He actually just did a new, he has the Mark Stein Club, and he does an audio Clubland Q&A. So he's apparently well enough to do to create media and to write and to think. And so hopefully that is the news that Mark Stein is on the mend. So we'll all keep praying for him.
Because he's done so well in his talks at your events.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Love Mark Stein.
All right. This question is from Mustang Pictures. Conservative outdoor political writer Gabriella Hoffman supports greenhouse gas reduction policies. This is according to a podcast you did with one of Trump's former advisors. Any info on that? Are we familiar with Gabriella?
I have I've heard of her. I read some of her stuff. I didn't see that, but I didn't do a podcast with her. I don't know which podcast that was.
Yeah, I know Gabriella. I only know her as a very vocal and vigorous climate realist and pushback on climate alarmism on social media. So not quite sure. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't, but I'll look into it.
All right. What seems to be the future for nuclear energy?
Very strong. It's especially with the small modular reactors. I think these are things that you can actually plunk down anywhere. You don't need massive water supply nearby for cooling. So we're going to see these small modular reactors over the next 10 years starting to pop up even in remote locations. And this can be done even for countries that don't have fossil fuels, especially for those countries. You can put them out in the middle of the desert. So I think nuclear power has a huge future. And in Canada, that's one thing Trudeau is doing right. He's boosting nuclear power. Now, of course, the excuse is because it's going to stop climate change, which, of course, it never will. But the fact is, nuclear has a bright future, especially with the small modular reactors.
And we have a good, safe, already tested nuclear form in the CANDU reactors.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot more of those, and they're going to get smaller and smaller. In fact, when an SMR appears on Amazon, I'm going to order one for my bunker here.
Look, I hope you guys are all right, but I've seen the bureaucratic inertia here in the U.S., and I don't know if we'll have a small modular reactor operating here in the next decade. I'd like to say we will.
Maybe
I'd like to say we will, but I've seen the bureaucratic inertia take down project after project. They were developing one in Idaho. They had subscribers, and then the subscribers backed out. And
yeah, believe it or not, the CANDU reactor, which uses heavy water as a moderator, it's been very successful. It takes twice as long to certify a CANDU reactor in Canada than it does in China. So China might very well be the first to get up these small modular reactors.
No, China's already getting some reactors up and some smaller reactors up. China's doing it. I was just thinking of the U.S. and North America, but
yeah, with Above Us Only Skies question saying, will Trump reduce the regulatory stranglehold on setting up new nuclear? I would say he's the one that's more likely to do it. What I would like to see is, if we have to have energy subsidies, I would like to see a flipping of the percentages from the wind and solar stuff going over towards nuclear instead, because that seems to me to be a much more worthy recipient. But right now, a very, very small pittance of our total energy subsidies go to nuclear. Less than even just carbon capture by itself, I think. So it's pretty crazy. I would love to see that reverse under Trump. Okay, we've got. Oh, here's a good question that we can fix right now. Can you put details where to find your guests in the show description? I think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, for sure. ICSC-climate.com is our American affiliate, but the Canadian one is ICSC-Canada.com. And it talks about all of our board members. We have Patrick Moore, for example, on our board of directors. So, yeah, we're speaking out. And you got your website too, Ron.
Yep, ours is friendsofscience.org.
Yeah.
And I have a personal one. It's climatechangeandmusic.com.
Oh, yeah, you're a great singer, guitarist.
That's still debatable.
And sensible-change.ca. That's important because we really, really want Canadians to sign up to be Pathfinders. So do go to sensible-change.ca, click that Pathfinder button, and I'll be helping teach you how to win. Because, of course, we're trying to replicate what we did in Ottawa across Canada.
Awesome. Okay, this is from JP, who says, greetings from Belgium. I have the feeling that there are more volcanoes than usual getting active. So do we know what the impact is going to be on climate? And we have another question that's kind of, I'll tie to that a bit, which has to do with, this is a auto spell error here, but this is the Hunga Tonga volcano eruption. Did that emit more methane than New Zealand cows? I don't know about methane. I think on that one, the water vapor was the major issue.
Yeah.
Very, very large amounts of water vapor.
Right. And I want to point out there is no Hungarian Tonga volcano.
Well, I said that it was a spell
check
problem. Yeah.
It added 10% to the water vapor in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
In one fell swoop. And gosh, when did that happen? 2 years ago. When it was the first time we breached 1.5? Shortly after Hunga Tonga. But no, that can't have anything to do with anything.
Yes, and those respected climate scientists are all ignoring that extra water vapor. No, that can't be it.
Yeah. So as far as more volcanic activity, I don't know. There are some scientists that I know who argue that their subsurface, underwater volcanic activity has picked up quite a bit. Whether and the extent to which that might affect ocean temperature measurements, I think are being debated. But I don't know if overall there's more volcanic activity. Certainly we can track it better, right? When anything goes off in Hawaii, we know about it. When anything goes off in Alaska, we know about it. And Greenland and Iceland and all those countries, we know about it.
There has been an uptick in volcanic activity.
Okay.
How much it affects it is definitely still a question.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that people don't know is apparently it's not CO2 just from the main cone and from the main pit, the crater. It's also from miles around things called fumaroles, which are cracks in the ground where you have CO2 emitted. So I've seen various reports that say that when you take into consideration the fumaroles around volcanoes, they put out a lot more CO2 than what the IPCC are saying. So it could, in fact, be a very major contributor to CO2 level, not global warming, because CO2 doesn't matter.
And of course, it's a localized source of direct heat, right? So if you have any temperature stations anywhere near active volcanoes, my suspicion is they're reading pretty high.
Here, I think this is a good one to close out on. From Andrew, who is asking for advice on how high school kids can approach a teacher that promotes false narratives with regards to climate change. My first answer is
our Climate Realism book.
Yeah,
our Climate at a Glance book.
Yes.
It says for
Climate
teachers
at
and
a glance.
students, handing this, it's for you.
Yeah.
It says so right on the cover.
Well, also,
and that's one of the programs CSCP wants to start getting people involved. Yes, take this book and give it to somebody that can do something with it.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that they can do very innocently is ask the teacher in front of the class, of course, how much has it warmed since 1880, Mr. So-and-so? They'll say 1.2 degrees. 1.2 degrees in 144 years. Would we feel that? So just ask them about data. How many extreme weather records were set in 1936? The answer is 27 statewide records across the U.S. If you look at the NOAA database. How many were set this year, Mr. Teacher?
Well, ask him what's the ideal temperature for the Earth?
Right.
One of our directors actually is just going through that right now. His kid came home with some climate, we'll call it propaganda.
I don't know, just a humble suggestion. They could also just start watching the Climate Realism Show every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. You know, just saying.
Look,
anyways, he actually got
else on Fridays at noon.
Yeah, our director got back to the teacher and laid out some of the thoughts he had. He wrote up a little message for them, and they were very receptive to it. And he's actually going to meet with the Minister of Education in Alberta here right shortly too. So I'm going to give him a book, obviously, to drop off with him. So I think it's opening up is the point I'm trying to get to.
All right. Is that the last question we have? I know may have jumped the gun by playing the music, but
yeah, we're pretty well out of questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Linnea. Thank you to everybody who was watching this show live on Rumble and on YouTube and on X and leaving questions, which is always a really fun way to end the show. We always learn a lot, and we hope that you always learn a lot as well. On this edition of the Climate Realism Show, I want to thank Ron Davison for being with us today. I want to thank, he's from the Friends of Science Coalition. Friends of Science Society, pardon me. Tom Harris with the International Climate Science Coalition out of Ottawa. Ron, you're in Calgary. I have never really had any good reason to wear a Canadian tuxedo on the air.
Come out to the Stampede. We'll show you around.
I have done it. I can't wait for my first visit to Calgary and to Ottawa for that matter. So thank you, two gentlemen, for being on the show. Please be on the lookout for their new book, especially if you live in the Great White North, Energy and Climate at a Glance, Canadian edition. Facts on 22 prominent climate topics. They don't just apply to Canada, they apply to the United States, and frankly, they apply to the world as well. Thank you, Linnea, for being on the show. Anthony Watts and H. Sterling Burnett from the Heartland Institute. My name is Jim Lakely. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.